I never thought a simple food delivery could shake me the way that day did. My job had always been routine: pick up the order, drive to the address, hand over the bag, and move on. I was used to short interactions, polite nods, quick thank yous, and the sound of doors closing behind me before I even made it back to the sidewalk. But the moment I carried that paper bag to Max's apartment, everything shifted. It started like any other stop. I remember standing at the bottom of the stairwell, balancing the warm bag of takeout in my hand, and climbing up the narrow steps. The air smelled faintly of fried chicken and garlic sauce, and I thought about how hungry I was. Usually, my mind drifted during deliveries. I planned out the rest of my route, counted the number of stops until my shift ended, or sometimes just zoned out entirely. But as I reached the top floor, I felt something unusual. Maybe it was the stillness of the hallway or the way the light flickered above Max's door, buzzing faintly like a secret waiting to be told. I knocked. At first, silence. I heard faint footsteps on the other side, a shuffle, then the sound of a lock turning. The door opened slowly, and there he was. Max. I had seen him before in passing, once outside when he was moving boxes from his car, another time when he passed me on the street with headphones on, lost in whatever song he was listening to. But standing there in front of him now, in his own doorway, felt different. His presence filled the space in a way I couldn't explain. It wasn't about how he looked, not exactly. It was the way he seemed caught between surprise and amusement at seeing me standing there, the delivery bag in my hand like some offering. Food delivery, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He smirked slightly, nodding. That's mine. Our eyes met for a second longer than they should have. It wasn't awkward silence exactly. It was charged, like the air right before a storm breaks, heavy and electric. I should have handed him the bag, smiled politely, and turned back down the stairs. That was my job, after all. But instead, I hesitated. My hand didn't move forward as quickly as it should have, and neither did his. He tilted his head, studying me in a way that made me feel exposed, as if he could see more than just a tired courier in a uniform. There was something playful in his expression, but something else too, something unspoken, something I didn't dare name yet. Long shift? He asked casually, his hand finally brushing mine as he reached for the bag. That small contact sent a ripple through me. I laughed lightly, trying to cover it up. Yeah, feels like it's never going to end. Guess you made it better with this, he said, lifting the bag slightly before setting it aside on a small table near the door. He didn't step back immediately, though. He stayed there, leaning against the doorframe, as if deciding whether or not to let me go. I should have turned and walked away right then, but something about the way he lingered pulled me in. It was as if he was silently asking me to stay for just a moment longer, and I couldn't resist. You live around here? He asked. Not far, I replied. I'm usually driving all over the place, though. This area is on my route a lot. Figures, he said, his voice low, almost amused. I've seen you before. Didn't think you'd notice me. The honesty in his words startled me. People usually kept things surface level with delivery drivers. No one ever admitted to noticing. But he said it so simply, as if it wasn't even a big deal. I noticed, I admitted before I could stop myself. The moment the words left my mouth, the tension sharpened. He looked at me differently now, and I felt heat rise in my chest. It wasn't embarrassment exactly. It was something deeper, more dangerous. He leaned slightly closer, his shoulder brushing the edge of the doorway. You always this honest. Not usually, I said quietly. A silence settled again, but it wasn't empty. It was thick with all the things neither of us were saying. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, faster than it should have been for such an ordinary situation. A food delivery, just a bag of takeout. That's all it was supposed to be. Yet somehow it had turned into something else, something I didn't have words for yet. He glanced down the hallway, then back at me, lowering his voice slightly. Most people just hand me the food and leave. I managed to smile. I'm not most people. That earned me another smirk, but this time softer, more genuine. He studied me, and for a moment I felt like he was weighing something in his mind. The kind of decision that doesn't seem important at first, but ends up changing everything. You want some water? He asked suddenly. You look like you've been on the road a while. I almost said no. I had more deliveries waiting, schedules to keep. but the words caught in my throat. Something inside me didn't want this moment to end yet. "Sure," I said. He stepped back, opening the door wider. I crossed the threshold, and just like that, I wasn't just a courier anymore. I was a guest. The air inside felt warmer than the hallway, carrying faint scents of food and coffee. The door closed behind me with a soft click that echoed louder in my head than it should have. I told myself I'd just stay for a moment, grab the water, and leave. But even then, deep down, I knew the truth. This wasn't just about food delivery anymore. This was the beginning of something else, something neither of us had planned, but both of us could feel. And as I stood there, watching Max pour water into a glass, I realized that tension wasn't going away anytime soon. It was only getting stronger. Ich erinnere Michigan Genoen Dyson Abend. ALS were knock immer in der Luft. EIN Flutschtiger Schatten. Demir nicht mehr von den Fersen Weichen will. Es were nicht der Regen, der draußen gegen die Fenster schlug. Und auch nicht das Schweißlicht der Straßenlaternen. Das in Max. Wansimer Herinfiel. Und auf dem Holzboden helles Streifenzog. Es were etwas anderes. Etwas. Das viel tiefer ging. Etwas. Das mit jedem Atemzug schwerer word. Ich saß auf einem Stuhl, der mir hingeschoben hat. Ein Glaswasser in der Hand. Und fragt Michigan. Warum ich nicht längst wieder unterwegs war. Ich hat bestelungen Routen, ein Uhr, deine Denlos tickte. Doch nix davon schien in diesem Moment geügt zu haben. Alles was Zalt, war die Art. Wir Michigan Ansa. ALS word entschieden. Ob mir inlik etwas sagen dürft. Das Gerlang vergraben hat. Sprachlang nicht. Stattdessen lief unruhig durch Zimmer. Griff sich in den Nacken. Sah auf die Regale. ALS suckt dort ein Antwort, die es nicht gab. Ich ließen gewaren, while ich spurt, das es keinen Sinn hat, in zu drangen. Es war, ALS stund, im Rand einer Clip, und Connie entschieden, ob springen word. Die Sekunden denten sich, mein Hirschlag folgt jedem seiner Schritt. Und Jed's Mal, wenn zu mir blickt, sah ich das Sagen, das Ringen in seinen Augen. I hadn't planned on staying. That's what I told myself as I sat across from Max, the glass of water cool in my hand, the quiet hum of the refrigerator filling the silence between us. My job was still waiting out there in the night. Boxes of food stacked neatly in the back of my car, each one destined for another doorbell, another brief interaction. Yet somehow I couldn't bring myself to stand up and leave. Something about the way Max moved, the way he looked at me with a half-smile that carried more weight than it should, held me in place like an invisible thread pulling tight around my chest. He sat opposite me, one elbow propped against the table, his fingers lightly drumming the wood as if trying to find the right rhythm to speak. His eyes weren't restless, though. They were fixed on me, unwavering. I felt myself shifting in my seat, both uneasy and unable to look away. It wasn't often someone stared at me like that, like I wasn't just a blur in their day, like they actually saw something worth holding on to. You ever get tired of pretending? He asked suddenly, his voice breaking the stillness. I blinked, not sure I'd heard him right. Pretending. He leaned back, exhaling slowly, as if he'd been holding those words for too long. Yeah, pretending to be someone you're not. Pretending that you're fine when you're not. Pretending that the life everyone sees is actually yours. His tone was calm, but beneath it there was something raw, almost trembling. It wasn't the kind of confession you made lightly. It wasn't small talk. My throat tightened as I tried to find a response, but nothing came immediately. I've spent years doing it, he continued, almost as if speaking to himself, smiling at people in town, making small jokes with coworkers, sitting through dinners with family where I nod at everything they say. And the whole time, I know they're talking to a version of me that isn't even real. I swallowed hard, shifting the glass between my palms. The weight of his words settled on me slowly, like a storm rolling in from a distance, the thunder still far away but inevitable. What do you mean? I asked carefully, though part of me already knew. His gaze flickered, and for a moment I thought he might retreat, shut it all down, laugh it off as a slip. But instead, he leaned forward, elbows on the table, lowering his voice as if the walls themselves might betray him. I'm tired of hiding who I am, he said quietly. I'm tired of acting like my life belongs to everyone else's expectations. I'm tired of being a son, a neighbor, a colleague, everything but myself. I don't even know who that is anymore. The honesty in his voice hit me harder than I expected. It was one thing to suspect, to imagine what might linger beneath his calm surface. But hearing it, spoken aloud in that kitchen, was something else entirely. I wanted to say something reassuring, something that would make the heaviness lift from his shoulders. But all I could manage was a quiet admission. I get that. And I did, more than I wanted to admit. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't standing alone in my own silence. I had always believed no one could understand what it felt like to censor yourself in every conversation, to measure every word, to constantly check over your shoulder in case your truth slipped out. But now, sitting there, I realized Max carried the same weight. And suddenly, the room felt smaller, closer, as if the air itself had tightened around us. He studied me, his expression softening. You too, huh? I nodded, though I didn't trust myself to say more. My heart pounded against my ribs, and I could feel heat rising up the back of my neck. It wasn't embarrassment, it was recognition. That dangerous, undeniable recognition when you see yourself in someone else and know there's no turning back. But with recognition came fear. And in our town, fear was a constant companion. It wasn't the kind of place where secrets stayed safe for long. The neighbors always noticed who parked in your driveway, who you were seen talking to at the grocery store, who lingered too long at your front door. The town breathed gossip, and once it caught your scent, there was no escaping it. I can't keep doing this, Max said suddenly, his voice cutting through my thoughts. I can't keep smiling at people who would hate me if they knew the truth. I can't keep living two lives just so no one asks questions. His hands clenched on the table, the tension in his knuckles stark against the dim kitchen light. It's exhausting. I wanted to reach across, to steady him somehow, but I stayed still. My instincts warred inside me. The urge to comfort him battling the knowledge of how dangerous it was to let anyone see too much. You're not alone, I said finally, my voice low. The words hung there between us, and for the first time that evening, something shifted in his expression. It wasn't relief, not exactly, but a flicker of connection, like a light sparking in the dark, small but impossible to ignore. For a long moment, we sat in silence. The refrigerator hummed, the clock ticked on the wall, and outside the wind picked up, rattling the branches against the window. The ordinary sounds of life filled the space, but none of it felt ordinary anymore. You know what scares me the most? He asked after a while. What? That if anyone finds out, I'll lose everything. My job, my family, the little bit of stability I've built. People here don't forgive things like this. They don't understand it. They don't want to. I felt his words like a blade turned inward. Because he was right. In a place like ours, even whispers could ruin you. I'd seen it before, how quickly a rumor spread, how merciless people could be when someone didn't fit the picture they wanted. But what scared me more was how much I wanted to ignore all of that in this moment. Sitting there, listening to him speak, I realized how long I had been waiting to hear someone else say the things I'd buried deep inside. It's not fair, I said quietly. Living like that, always watching your back, always wondering who knows, who suspects, always scared of your own shadow. He met my eyes again, and for a second the tension shifted, softened into something fragile and unspoken. Exactly, he whispered. We both knew we were treading on dangerous ground. Every word we spoke carried risk. Every glance could be misinterpreted. Every pause thickened the air with possibilities we weren't ready to name. But at the same time, it was intoxicating. The more he opened up, the more I felt myself drawn in, unable to resist the pull. And that was the paradox that left me shaken. Because as much as I wanted to hold on to this moment, I also knew what it could cost us. One wrong step, one careless word overheard, and the fragile truth we'd shared would shatter under the weight of the town's judgment. When I finally stood to leave, the air between us still hummed with everything unsaid. Max walked me to the door, his expression unreadable, though his eyes lingered on me a second too long. "Thanks for listening," he said softly, almost as if afraid the words themselves might betray him. I nodded. "Anytime." As I stepped back into the cool night air, the quiet streets stretching out before me, I knew nothing would be the same again. For the first time, I had found someone who understood the silence I lived in. But I also knew that silence was more dangerous than ever now, because once you share it with someone, it became harder and harder to hide. And deep down, I understood one thing with absolute certainty. This was only the beginning. The secret he carried was now bound to me too. And in a town like ours, secrets had a way of clawing their way into the light, no matter how tightly you try to hold them in the dark. I should have known the silence wouldn't last. Secrets in our town never stayed hidden for long. People had sharp eyes and sharper tongues, and no matter how carefully you try to guard something, sooner or later it slipped through a crack. I had convinced myself that Max and I could carve out a small space where we were safe, where the world couldn't touch us. But I was wrong. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon. I remember it clearly because the sky was heavy with rain, the kind that threatened all morning before finally breaking loose. My shift had ended early, and I'd gone to Max's place, telling myself it was only for a coffee, a short visit before heading home. He seemed lighter that day, more open than before. We sat near the window, listening to the drops start their steady rhythm against the glass. For the first time, I thought maybe, just maybe, we were finding our balance in this dangerous dance. That was when a knock came. Neither of us expected it. Max frowned, setting down his mug. He went to the door, and when it opened, my stomach dropped. Standing there was Evan, a guy we both knew. Not a close friend of mine, but someone I'd seen around enough times to recognize instantly. He was the kind of person who thrived on stories, the sort who collected other people's business like trading cards. His eyes flicked from Max to me in an instant, sharp and calculating. "Didn't know you had company," he said, his tone casual, but his smile too knowing. Max shifted uncomfortably, blocking part of the doorway with his body. "Yeah, just a friend." The words hit me like a stone to the chest. "Just a friend," said so quickly, so easily, as if rehearsed. He didn't even glance back at me when he said it. Evan's eyes narrowed slightly, the kind of look that said he had already decided what story he'd be telling before the end of the day. "Right," he said slowly. "Well, I'll catch you later." As the door closed, the silence in the room became unbearable. I stared at Max, waiting for him to say something, anything that would undo what I'd just heard. But he didn't. He only stood there, his back pressed to the wood, his shoulders tight, as though bracing for an impact that hadn't come yet. "Just a friend," I finally said, my voice low. He winced, closing his eyes briefly. "Alex, I didn't mean..." But I cut him off, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "That's what I am to you. After everything you told me, after everything you made me believe, I'm just a friend." His face tightened with guilt, but also with fear. It was written in the way his eyes darted toward the window, as if the world outside was already pressing against the glass, listening. "You don't understand," he whispered. "He talks. Everyone listens to him. If he even suspects. He already suspects." I snapped. "You saw it in his face. He'll spin it however he wants, no matter what you say." Max turned away, raking a hand through his hair, his voice breaking. "I can't risk it, Alex. Not here, not now. I can't have a whole town watching me, tearing me apart." The anger in me burned hotter because beneath it was hurt. Deep, sharp hurt that cut more than I expected. I had told myself I was ready for this possibility, that I understood the risks. But hearing him reduce me to nothing more than a casual acquaintance in front of someone else, it was different. It was a betrayal I hadn't braced for. I left not long after, my chest hollow and tight. The rain was pouring now, soaking me as I walked to my car, but I barely felt it. My mind replayed the scene over and over, Max's voice echoing, "Just a friend." The phrase rang like a bell I couldn't silence. By the next morning, the rumors had already started. It was subtle at first. A pair of neighbors pausing mid-conversation when I walked by. A coworker raising an eyebrow when Max's name came up. The kind of small, sharp gestures that let you know people were already building stories in their heads. And the more I noticed, the more I realized how quickly Evan's observation had spread. He hadn't needed proof. All he needed was the image of me at Max's place, and the town had done the rest. I avoided Max for a few days, partly out of anger, partly out of self-preservation. But the space didn't make it easier. If anything, the absence made the betrayal heavier. I kept hearing his words, kept seeing the way he had shut the door with me standing just behind him, erased from the picture before I could even breathe. When I finally saw him again, it was at the cafe downtown. He was sitting at a corner table, shoulders hunched, staring into a coffee that had long since gone cold. I should have walked past, but something in me wouldn't let it go. I sat down across from him without asking. He looked up, startled, his eyes filled with guilt that hadn't faded. "Alex," he said quietly. I didn't give him time to ease into it. "You think calling me just a friend will protect you? Do you think it'll stop them from talking?" His jaw tightened. "I don't know what else to do." "You don't get it. The second they think they know the truth, it's over. I'll lose everything. My father will disown me. My job will turn on me. I don't have the luxury of—" "Of what?" I interrupted, my voice harsher than I intended. "Of being honest? Of not shoving me into a corner every time someone looks too closely?" He didn't answer. His silence was worse than any excuse he could have given. Because in that silence was the truth. He wasn't ready. He might never be. The betrayal wasn't in the words themselves. It was in the choice. He had chosen fear over me. I stood, my chair scraping loudly against the floor, and for a moment the entire cafe went quiet. Eyes flicked toward us, curious, suspicious. I didn't care. Let them wonder. Let them talk. The sting of being dismissed, erased, had already cut deeper than their whispers ever could. I left him there, staring into his untouched coffee, and walked back into the rain-soaked street. My chest ached with something I couldn't name. Anger, sadness, longing, all tangled into one unbearable knot. I wanted to believe he could still choose differently, that he could still stand beside me. But the echo of his words wouldn't fade. Just a friend. The phrase haunted me, following me through every quiet street and every shadowed glance. It wasn't just what he said, it was what it meant. That no matter how much connection we had, no matter how real it felt in those private moments, out in the world I was nothing. And knowing that truth cut deeper than any rumor ever could. I told myself I wouldn't go back, that I wouldn't let myself be pulled into that silence again. But even as I said it, even as the rain plastered my clothes to my skin, I knew the story wasn't finished. Secrets like ours didn't end cleanly. They lingered, they festered, and they always came back to demand an answer. I had convinced myself that the sting of betrayal would fade with time, that if I kept my distance from Max long enough, the words "just a friend" would stop echoing in my head. But the truth was, time didn't dull it. If anything, the days that followed sharpened it, cutting deeper with every glance, every rumor, every reminder that what we shared in private could be erased in public with a single phrase. And yet, no matter how hard I tried to stay away, I couldn't. Something about him kept pulling me back. Maybe it was unfinished business, maybe it was stubbornness, or maybe it was something far more dangerous. The simple fact that I couldn't stop caring. When I finally went back to see him, the air between us was thick with everything we hadn't said. He opened the door, his eyes shadowed, his face drawn. He didn't smile. He didn't joke. He just stepped aside to let me in, and that silence told me everything. The house felt colder than usual, as if even the walls carried the weight of what was happening inside. We sat across from each other, the space between us wider than ever, though the table was small. "There's something you need to know," he said finally, his voice low, almost defeated. I waited, my chest tight. "My father came by yesterday." The way he said it made me brace myself before I even knew why. "He asked about you," Max continued, his hands clasped tightly together. "About why you've been around so much." He didn't say it outright, but I could see it in his eyes. He suspects. I swallowed, the familiar rush of fear rising in me. "And what did you tell him?" Max's eyes dropped to the table. "That you were a friend." Again, I thought maybe it would end there. But it didn't. He paused, his voice catching. "He told me he's not ready to accept any of this. That he raised me to live a certain way, to follow certain rules, and if I step outside of them, I'm on my own. The words hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just the rejection itself. It was the weight of what it meant. For Max, this wasn't just about us. It was about everything. His family, his home, his foundation. "What did you say?" I asked, though my voice was barely more than a whisper. He looked up at me then, his eyes raw. I didn't say anything. I just stood there. I couldn't find the words. And now I feel like I've already lost him. Silence pressed in around us, thick and suffocating. I wanted to reach across the table, to close the distance between us, but something held me back. Maybe it was the memory of his words to Evan. Maybe it was the fear that this was another moment where he'd choose silence over me. "Max," I said finally, forcing my voice to stay steady. "This isn't just about your father. This is about you. About us. If you keep hiding, if you keep letting their expectations dictate your life, then we don't stand a chance." His jaw tightened, his hands trembling slightly. "You think I don't know that? You think I don't feel it every second? But what am I supposed to do? Walk into the middle of town and announce it? Watch everything I've built burn down around me?" His words were sharp, but they weren't angry. They were desperate, and that desperation cut through me because I understood it. I'd lived it, but I also knew what it was costing him and what it was costing me. "I'm not asking you to make a speech," I said quietly. "I'm asking you to stop erasing me. Stop erasing yourself. Because if you can't even admit what we are to the people who matter most to you, then maybe it doesn't matter at all." The silence that followed was brutal. His eyes flickered with something, fear, guilt, maybe even love, but he didn't speak. And in that silence, my heart cracked. I stood, the chair legs scraping against the floor, and his eyes followed me. "I can't keep being invisible, Max. I can't keep being the person you only acknowledge behind closed doors. Either we stop running, or we stop altogether." My words hung there, a challenge and a plea all at once. He didn't move, didn't protest, didn't stop me as I walked toward the door. When I stepped outside, the cold air hit me like a slap, sharp and unforgiving. The street was quiet, the world moving on as if nothing had changed, but inside me everything had shifted. For the first time, I realized the truth I had been avoiding. This wasn't just about love or fear or secrets. This was about choice. Max had to decide whether he was willing to stand with me, or whether he would keep letting the world dictate who he was allowed to be. And I had to decide how much longer I was willing to wait for him to make that choice. The weight of it pressed down on me as I walked away, every step heavier than the last. Because deep down, I knew the next move would determine everything. There was no middle ground left. No half measures. No safe shadows to hide in. Either we admitted the truth, or we lost it forever. I had told myself I was done waiting, that I wouldn't let my life hang in the balance of Max's silence any longer. But even as I said it, I knew the truth. I wasn't ready to let go of him. Not yet, because something in the way he looked at me, even in his weakest moments, told me he wanted more than the fear that kept him caged. It was only a question of whether he would ever find the strength to break free. The answer came sooner than I expected. It was a Saturday morning, the kind of morning when the town seemed too quiet, too watchful. I was walking down Main Street, the weight of the week pressing on me when I heard his voice. Clear, steady, carrying across the small crowd gathered outside the cafe. "I'm done hiding." The words froze me in place. He stood there, in the open, his father on one side of the crowd, Evan on the other, and half the town between them. His voice wasn't loud, but it was strong enough that every ear turned, every eye fixed on him. My chest tightened, because this was the moment we had both been avoiding, the line neither of us thought he would dare to cross. "I've spent too many years pretending," he continued, his hands trembling slightly, but his eyes steady. "Pretending to be someone I'm not, pretending to live a life that doesn't belong to me. And I can't do it anymore. Not for my father, not for my neighbors, not for anyone." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some faces hardened instantly, judgment sharp in their eyes. Others looked uncertain, caught between curiosity and discomfort. Evan smirked, as if waiting for Max to crumble under the weight of his own confession. But Max didn't. He straightened his shoulders, his jaw tight. "This is me, and if that means some of you turn your backs on me, So be it. I'd rather lose half the town than lose myself. The silence that followed was suffocating. It stretched on, heavy and unrelenting, until finally someone turned away, muttering under their breath. Then another followed. One by one, people peeled off, whispering to each other, shaking their heads. But not everyone left. A few stayed, their expressions softer, more thoughtful. Not supportive, not yet, but not condemning either. And me, I couldn't move. My heart pounded as I watched him. The man who had once reduced me to just a friend, now standing in front of everyone, refusing to erase me, refusing to erase himself. His father's voice cut through the air like a blade. You think this makes you strong? You think this is courage? It's a disgrace. I told you I wasn't ready to accept this, and I never will. The words were harsh, but Max didn't flinch. For the first time, he didn't shrink beneath his father's shadow. Then that's your choice, he said firmly. But it's not mine. The crowd shifted uneasily. Evan, never one to miss a chance to stir the pot, laughed quietly. Guess the rumors weren't just rumors after all. All eyes flicked to him, and for once, the smirk faltered under the weight of so many stares. He had built his power on whispers, on being the first to know and the first to spread. But now, with the truth laid bare, his weapon was useless. The gossip he thrived on was no longer gossip. It was fact spoken by the one person he couldn't twist. Max's gaze locked on him, steady and unyielding. You spent weeks trying to turn me into your story. But this is mine, not yours. And you don't get to control it anymore. The word struck harder than any insult could. Evan looked away, his smirk collapsing into silence. For the first time, he had nothing to say. I don't know what gave me the courage, but in that moment, I stepped forward. My legs moved before my mind could catch up, carrying me through the crowd until I was standing at Max's side. He glanced at me, surprise flickering in his eyes, but then something else followed, something like relief. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The act of standing there, visible, undeniable, said everything. The whispers rose again, sharper this time, but I didn't care. Let them talk. Let them twist it however they wanted. What mattered was that for the first time, Max and I weren't hiding. The crowd eventually dispersed, some with judgment etched on their faces, others with uncertainty, a few with quiet support. His father walked away without another word, his back rigid, his rejection clear. Evan lingered a moment longer, his eyes dark with something that looked like resentment, before slipping into the background where his voice carried no weight anymore. When it was finally just the two of us, the street eerily quiet again, Max exhaled shakily. His hands were trembling, his voice barely steady. I thought I'd never be able to do that. I looked at him, my chest tight with pride and something deeper. You did. He nodded slowly, his gaze dropping to the ground. I don't know what's going to happen now. I might lose my father. My job might turn on me. Half the town will probably never look at me the same way again. Maybe, I admitted, but you won't lose yourself. His eyes met mine then, and for the first time, there was no fear in them, only certainty. As we walked together down the quiet street, the weight of everything still pressing in, I felt something I hadn't in weeks, hope. Not the fragile, fleeting kind that came in stolen moments, but something stronger. Because now, whatever came next, we would face it in the open. Not as secrets, not as shadows, but as ourselves. And in that simple truth, there was more power than any rumor, any rejection, any judgment could ever take away.